Today we're going to finish the 4th chapter of the 1st canto and then start on the 5th chapter. And this 4th chapter has been speaking mostly about Narada Muni and his great spiritual master Vyasadeva, his student Vyasadeva, and how Vyasadeva divided the original one Veda into 4 to make it more understandable, and he gave his disciples, his principal disciples, each one Veda to form a disciplic succession to keep that Veda alive by the oral tradition. And now we're going to hear how he wrote the Mahabharata for persons who are not capable of reading the original 4 Vedas, and parts of the 4 Vedas are the Upanishads, the 108 Upanishads, which are very philosophical. So he wrote the Mahabharata, which is more concerned with history and many different topics, such as history and diplomacy and pastimes of great devotees in the past. And so it's full of stories that are very entertaining as well as instructive. So text 25 says, "Out of compassion, the great sage Vyasadeva thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life, that is, dividing the Vedas into 4 parts, which are the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. The Rig Veda deals with sacrifices that are ultimately meant for Lord Vishnu or Krishna, but the conduit to Vishnu is through different devatas or demigods, such as Indra and Varuna and Chandra and Devi or Durga and so forth. And that is so that there's like 2 staircases. One is going up and one is coming down, or 2 elevators. So the one going up is the offerings made by the persons that are seeking favors from God. And so they are making different offerings according to highly ritualized ceremonies conducted by qualified brahmanas. And then the Lord is blessing them, and that is the downward elevator, and he's sending his blessings through the demigods to the people. So there are different sections of the Vedas. So what we're talking about now is called the Karma Kanda section. That is where people are asking basically for material benefits, and as long as they follow the ritualized forms and the lifestyle of living in the mode of goodness, they're able to get these benefits. But the goal of getting those benefits is not simply to enjoy material life. It's rather to make material life easier so that they're able to have time and energy for spiritual activities. However, in the age of Kali, or this present age, this is misunderstood, and people think that the goal of Vedic rituals is for them to have material prosperity, health, and good parentage, etc. But Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita what is the actual purpose of these Vedic sacrifices. Sahayagya prajasristva purarava prajapati anenya sarva vistvadvam prasidvistvadvam esavostvistakamadu. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, and along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna," or sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. So the whole idea of the Vedic Varna Ashrama system is that people can have dharma, religiosity; artha, economic development; kama, permitted sense gratification or limited sense gratification; and moksha, liberation from the cycle of birth and death, so they can go back to the spiritual world. Many people get stuck on the dharma artha, religious activities meant for economic development. And because of that, they never get to actual moksha. They get a type of, let's say, limited moksha, that is being elevated to the heavenly planets in the material world, but when their acquired pious activities are exhausted, they come back down again. So that's called the Ferris wheel syndrome. They just go up and down, so they never actually get real moksha. Or moksha means one is so attached to Vishnu or Krishna with love and devotion that they no longer have any material desires. They only have desires to please the Lord through devotional service. So in the purport to this verse, 3:10, 3rd chapter, 10th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, it says, "The Prajapati, or the benevolent father of all living entities, is Lord Vishnu, and he is the Lord of all living creatures, all worlds and all beauties, and the protector of everyone. The Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform yajnas, sacrifices, for the satisfaction of Vishnu, so that while in the material world they can live very comfortably, without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body, they can enter into the kingdom of God." That is the whole program. So the material world exists because some minority of living entities like us chose to separate ourselves from God because we have what's called limited free will. And if we misuse that free will, which is a possibility always when there's free will, we are put into the material world. We come down from the spiritual world into the material world, where we're given a chance at correcting ourselves, correcting that errant and perverted mentality of wanting to be separate from God, and by that trying to exploit the material nature for our own pleasure and ignore God. Unfortunately, today that is the case for the large majority of the population. However, the real purpose of the material nature is not to become a competitor of God, and not to try and dominate and exploit the material nature for selfish self-indulgence. But the real purpose of it is to reform, is reformation, by which we develop again dependence and surrender and service to God, and develop, or Krishna, and develop our love and devotion, and then return back to where we belong, the spiritual world, in a spiritual body that's not subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. But there are many obstacles to doing that, because the material world is full of illusory concepts and illusory types of activities that bind people to the cycle of suffering. The cycle of suffering is very interesting. It's explained in more advanced parts of the Vedic literature. It all begins with a tendency or an inclination for pleasure. The nature of the spiritual world is anandamaya vyasad, which means that the original nature of the living entity is to be subordinate to God and to be a secondary enjoyer in relationship with God. God or Krishna is the primary enjoyer. However, when one develops a certain enviousness of Krishna in the spiritual world, which is hard to believe, but it's happened. It's only a minority of people. Only 1/4 of the creation or of the existence is the material world, and only 1/4 of the inhabitants of the spiritual world choose or mischoose the desire to live separate from God and try and be a competitor. So, therefore, the material world is like a prison meant for the reformation of such errant persons. However, people think in the material world that the purpose of life is to enjoy sense gratification, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And they reject the existence of a soul. They reject the existence of the spiritual world. They reject the existence of a supreme personality of Godhead. And they spend almost all their time trying to make money and spending the money on selfish pursuits. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the purport to this third chapter, 10th verse, it says that the Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform yagyas or sacrifices for the satisfaction of Vishnu, so that while in the material world they can live very comfortably without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body they can enter into the kingdom of God. That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of yagya, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In the age of Kali, the present age that we're living in, there are 4 ages. There's Satya, Dwapara, Treta, and Kali Yuga. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtan Yagya, the chanting of the names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this chanting system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan Yagya and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna, in his devotional form, as Lord Chaitanya, is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam as follows, with the special reference to the Sankirtan Yagya. Krishna Vanyam Tisak Krishna Sangapangasta Parsadam Yajnai Sankirtana Parayer Yajanti Hi Sumidasaha. In the age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates by performance of Sankirtan Yagya. Other yagyas, or sacrifices prescribed in the Vedic literature, are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtan Yagya is easy and sublime for all purposes, as recommended in Bhagavad Gita also, 9th chapter, 14th verse. Okay, so we see that there's a plan of the Lord to help even those people like ourselves who revolted against him. So, this Vyasadeva's purpose here, in this, as we're learning in this chapter, is to further help people by making the Vedic knowledge more accessible to them. So he divides the Vedas into 4 parts, and then to help even those people who are not philosophically inclined, he writes the Mahabharata, which is full of instructive stories, and basically it's the history of the world from the beginning of material creation up until the end of the Battle of Kurukshetra. So he says, thus he compiled the great historical narration called the Mahabharata for women, laborers, and friends of the twice-born. So friends of the twice-born are low-born, are persons who were born in the Brahmana and Kshatriya and Vaishya families, but who are not following the rules and regulations of Vedic life. That's why it says the friends of the twice-born. The twice-born are persons who are actually following. And for women and laborers, so the laborers and the friends of the twice-born are mostly men, and then women, not as a whole class, but fallen women who are not also following the Vedic path. Now in the purport, Prabhupada says, the friends of the twice-born families are those who are born in the families of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, or the spiritually cultured families, but who themselves are not equal to their forefathers. Such descendants are not recognized as such for want of purificatory achievement. In other words, they have fallen away by, again, their misuse of free will into sinful activities. The purificatory activities begin even before the birth of a child, and the seed-giving reformatory process is called Garbhodana Samskara. One who has not undergone such Garbhodana Samskara or spiritual family planning is not accepted as being of an actual twice-born family. So that includes just about the entire population. Very few people are following the Garbhodana Samskara. The Garbhodana Samskara is followed by other purificatory processes. So these are called the Samskaras, or the periods of passage from one situation of life to another. And they are crucial periods where one should go through a purificatory process to enter the next period. So these are called samskaras. The whole purpose of properly organized spiritual life is purification of the desire for sense gratification and reorientation of one's focus in life to pleasing God. And the symptom of a materialistic person is they really have no desire to please God. They're just trying to please themselves. The Garbhodana Samskara is followed by other purificatory processes, out of which the sacred thread ceremony is one. This is performed at the time of spiritual initiation. After this particular samskara, one is rightly called twice born. One birth is calculated during the seed-giving samskara, and the second birth is calculated at the time of spiritual initiation. One who has been able to undergo such important samskaras can be called a bona fide twice born. So, most people don't go through this Garbhodana samskara for procreation. Therefore, children are born that are not actually very spiritually inclined. Everyone has a natural inclination toward understanding in God, but when the family is not properly situated and they have not followed all the rules and regulations of spiritual life, they end up with children who are somewhat resistant to spiritual life. Now that can be corrected by the atmosphere in the family and what kind of education they receive. But unfortunately, most of the kids are sent to what's called slaughterhouses. Those are schools where the teachers are not devotees, the curriculum is not spiritual. In fact, it's the opposite. It teaches you that the goal of life is sense gratification, and to have sense gratification you need money, and to make money you have to be engaged almost all the time in activities that have nothing to do with God. So the children don't actually become Krishna conscious. So now it says, if the father and the mother do not undertake the process of spiritual family planning and simply beget children out of passion only, their children are called Dvija Bandhus. that is, friends of the twice-born. These Dvijabandhus are certainly not as intelligent as the children of the regular twice-born families. The Dvijabandhus are classified with the Sudras and the women class, who are by nature less intelligent. The Sudras and the women class do not have to undergo any samskara save and except the ceremony of marriage. The less intelligent classes of men, namely women, Sudras, and unqualified sons of the higher castes, are devoid of necessary qualifications to understand the purpose of the transcendental Vedas. What are the necessary qualifications to understand the purpose of the Vedas? It's to come to the level of sattva guna, goodness, but through perverted education, through perverted association, through being subjected to all kinds of nonsensical things. The children are living mostly in the mode of passion and ignorance. Mostly in passion, maybe mixed goodness and passion. And therefore, they never actually develop the genuine qualities. What are the genuine qualities? We see, we read about Narada Muni. He was born in a very low family, but fortunately his mother, a maidservant, served saintly people for 4 months, and during that time the boy, who was only 5, he developed a taste to hear the discourses of saintly people. He offered them some service. He was given permission to eat the remnants of their food or their prasad, and in this way he developed a natural attraction for spiritual life. And then, his mother precipitously died when he was still only 5, after the saintly people left. But that 4-month period was such a strong experience for him, even though he was so young, he continued to follow a spiritual path the rest of his life. And then his next life he becomes Narada Muni, the greatest saint in the universe. And he's still alive. He's still traveling wherever he wants to go in the material and spiritual world. And that is by intense association with, at a very young age, which is when children should be intensely educated, not necessarily academically, but intensely in the sense of good association constantly, regular hearing and chanting, taking prasadam, engaging in chanting the holy names, and learning all the arts and crafts of devotional service. The less intelligent classes of men, namely women, Sudras, and unqualified sons of the higher castes, are devoid of necessary qualifications to understand the purpose of the transcendental Vedas. For them the Mahabharata was prepared. The purpose of the Mahabharata is to administer the purpose of the Vedas, and therefore within this Mahabharata the summary Veda of Bhagavad Gita is placed. The less intelligent are more interested in stories than in philosophy, and therefore the philosophy of the Vedas in the form of the Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Lord Shri Krishna. Vyasadeva and Lord Krishna are both on the transcendental plane, and therefore they collaborated in doing good to the fallen souls of this age. The Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic knowledge. It is the first book of spiritual values, as the Upanishads are. Well, it is an Upanishad. Upanishad means Upanishad. It helps you come closer to God. It is the first book of spiritual values, as the Upanishads are. The Vedanta philosophy is the subject matter for study by the spiritual graduates. Only the postgraduate spiritual student can enter into the spiritual or devotional service of the Lord. It is a great science, and the great professor is the Lord himself in the form of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and persons who are empowered by him can initiate others in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So this Bhagavad Gita has very special position for the spiritual life of living entities, especially those who are not endowed with exceptional intellectual properties or qualities. And therefore, there is a lot of information in Bhagavad Gita itself, how it is the most super excellent Vedic literature. Like, for example, in at the end of the introduction, you have the Gita Mahatmya, and it says, if one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. It also says, if one properly follows the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, one can be freed from all the miseries and anxieties of life. One will be freed from all fears in this life, and one's next life will be spiritual. And then it says, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. One may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in water, but if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. And then, because Bhagavad Gita is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one need not read any other Vedic literature. One need only attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. In the present age, people are so absorbed in mundane activities that it is not possible for them to read all the Vedic literatures. But this is not necessary. This one book, Bhagavad Gita, will suffice because it is the essence of all Vedic literatures, and especially because it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who drinks the water of the Ganges attains salvation. So what to speak of one who drinks the nectar of Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is the essential nectar of the Mahabharata, and it is spoken by Lord Krishna himself, the original Vishnu. And Bhagavad Gita comes from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Ganges is said to emanate from the lotus feet of the Lord. Of course, there's no difference between the mouth and the feet of the Supreme Lord. But from an impartial study, we can appreciate that Bhagavad Gita is even more important than the water of the Ganges. This Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads, is just like a cow, and Lord Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is just like a calf, and learned scholars and pure devotees are to drink the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. In this present day, people are very much eager to have one scripture, one God, one religion, and one occupation. Therefore, let there be one scripture only, one common scripture for the whole world, Bhagavad Gita. Let there be one God for the whole world, Sri Krishna. One hymn, one mantra, one prayer, the chanting of his name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And let there be one work only, the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so here we see Bhagavad Gita has a very special position. And then the 4th chapter, 40th verse, it says, out of many standard and authoritative revealed scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita is the best. Persons who are almost like animals have no faith in or knowledge of the standard revealed scriptures, and some, even though they have knowledge of or can cite passages from the revealed scriptures, have actually no faith in these words. And even though others may have faith in the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, they do not believe in or worship the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Such persons cannot have any standing in Krishna consciousness. They fall down. Out of all the above-mentioned persons, those who have no faith and are always doubtful make no progress at all. Men without faith in God and his revealed word find no good in this world, nor in the next. For them, there is no happiness whatsoever. One should therefore follow the principles of revealed scriptures with faith and thereby be raised to the platform of knowledge. Only this knowledge will help one become promoted to the transcendental platform of spiritual understanding. In other words, doubtful persons have no status whatsoever in spiritual emancipation. One should therefore follow in the footsteps of great acharyas who are in the disciplic succession and thereby attain success. So this is basically the dilemma of modern education. It teaches everyone to doubt everything. And they consider that intellectual. That is, to doubt everything. And there is it is possibly an intellectual process to begin with a doubt and then receive bona fide knowledge to erase the doubt. But there's no bona fide knowledge in modern education. It's all based on materialistic concepts. And those materialistic concepts are the basis of sinful life. And therefore, those things are taught in a very systematic way in schools. The Big Bang, Darwinism, Freudianism, Marxism. Marxism has become a very major problem in the United States. This is a country that's a capitalist country, but almost all the major big professors in the major universities are Marxists, teaching kids that one should be dependent on the state. And the state has to engage in social welfare activities. In other words, giving handouts to the people. So this is a very attractive kind of philosophy for lazy people. And that's what it does. It creates lazy people. And you see them all the time. When half the population becomes lazy, the other half is going to be in big trouble because they'll be working to feed the lazies and crazies. And pretty soon the whole system collapses. That's what happened in the Soviet Union. The whole system collapsed economically because everyone was dependent. One fundamental principle of Krishna consciousness is to develop dependency on Krishna, but not on the state and not on anyone else. And this is a very important point that we have to understand. The Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 8th chapter, 37th verse, Prabhupada mentions the word dependent 18 times in one purport. And he says, the Pandavas are most fortunate because with all good luck, they were entirely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. In the material world, to be dependent on the mercy of someone else is the utmost sign of misfortune. Imagine if you're completely dependent on the state. 1:837. But in the case of our transcendental relation with the Lord, it is the most fortunate case when we can live completely dependent on Him. The material disease is due to thinking. Let's count the number of times now. So far he's done it 3 times. The material disease is due to thinking of becoming independent of everything. But the cruel material nature does not allow us to become independent. The false attempt to become independent of the stringent laws of nature is known as material advancement of experimental knowledge. It's called also the struggle for existence, the attempt to become independent of the laws of nature, birth, death, old age, disease, right? The whole material world is moving in this false attempt of becoming independent of the laws of nature. Beginning from Ravana, who wanted to prepare a direct staircase to the planets of heaven, down to the present age, they are trying to overcome the laws of nature. They are trying now to approach distant planetary systems by electronic mechanical power. But the highest goal of human civilization is to work hard under the guidance of the Lord and become completely dependent on Him. Okay, 4. The highest achievement of perfect civilization is to work with valor, but at the same time depend completely on the Lord. 5. The Pandavas were the ideal executors of the standard of civilization. Undoubtedly, they were completely dependent on the goodwill of the Lord. 6. But they were not idle parasites of the Lord. They were all highly qualified both by personal character and by physical activities. Still, they always looked for the mercy of the Lord because they knew that every living being is dependent by constitutional position. 7. The perfection of life is therefore to become dependent on the will of the Lord. 8. Instead of becoming falsely independent in the material world. So, if you start counting the falsely independents also, it becomes 18. That's when it becomes 18. If you don't count them, it will be a little less than 18. Those who try to become falsely independent of the Lord are called anatta, or without any guardian, whereas those who are completely dependent, 9, on the will of the Lord are called sanata, or those having someone to protect them. Therefore, we must try to be sanata, so that we can always be protected from the unfavorable condition of material existence. By the deluding power of the external material nature, we forget that the material condition of life is the most undesirable perplexity. Yeah, we forget that. The Bhagavad Gita therefore directs us that after many, many births, one fortunate person becomes aware of the fact that Vasudeva is all in all, or Krishna is all in all, and that the best way of leading one's life is to surrender unto him completely. That is the sign of a Mahatma. All the members of the Pandava family were Mahatmas in householder life. So that's a very important phrase, Mahatma in a householder life. That should be our motto, Mahatma in householder life. Maharaj Yudhisthira was the head of these Mahatmas, and Queen Kunti Devi was the mother. The lessons of the Bhagavad Gita and all the Puranas, specifically the Bhagavad Purana, are therefore inevitably connected with the history of the Pandava Mahatmas. For them, separation from the Lord was just like separation of a fish from water. Srimati Kunti Devi therefore felt such separation like a thunderbolt, and the whole prayer of the queen is to try and persuade the Lord to stay with them. After the battle of Kurukshetra, although the inimical kings were killed, after the battle of Kurukshetra, although the inimical kings were killed, their sons and grandsons were still there to deal with the Pandavas. It is not only the Pandavas who were put into the condition of enmity, but all of us are always in such a condition, and the best way is to become completely dependent, 9, on the will of the Lord, and thereby overcome all difficulties of material existence. So if you count not independent, it comes up to close to 18 times in this purport. So, also in this purport, it talks about anatta and sanata. Nata means the Lord, anatta means not depending on the Lord, and sanata means completely dependent on the Lord. So, but what is important here, and this is one very important principle of Krishna consciousness, it is that the most, it says that to be dependent on the mercy of someone else is the utmost sign of misfortune. So, what is Obamacare? It's being completely dependent on the state for your medical services. What is food stamps? Being completely dependent on the government for your food. What is subsidized rent? Being completely dependent on the government for your shelter. So health, food, shelter, right? And what is Social Security? Being completely dependent, again, on the government for your retirement. So all these things are very negative for spiritual life when one is so dependent on another's mercy. The real goal is to be completely dependent on the Lord, like the Pandavas, and they were not losers for it. It might seem that for some part of their life they seem to be losers, but actually they were tremendously successful because of that dependency. The highest goal of human civilization is to work hard under the guidance of the Lord and become completely dependent on Him. So we're going to post this. This is a motto. We discussed this morning. They're going to make a poster and put it up downstairs. The highest achievement of perfect civilization is to work with valor. Valor means courage. But at the same time, depend completely on the Lord. The Pandavas were the ideal executors. There's a difference between execution or execute and executor. They're spelled the same. They're pronounced differently. When they're pronounced differently, there's a reason why, because it has different meanings. The word execute has many meanings. One meaning is you execute a criminal who's been judged as, who murdered someone and they've been found guilty. Right? You can, in IT, you execute a program, a process, right? But then an executor has many meanings also. An executor is someone who is legally appointed to administer a inheritance or to oversee a will, or to have some kind of legal function in a company. They don't own the company, but there are certain functions in the company, like if it goes into bankruptcy or something like that, they can try and lead it out of bankruptcy or take it through the bankruptcy. And then execute. Well, you can execute a prisoner, right, by hanging them or killing them, right? Or you can execute a task. So you see, the English can be very confusing because the word can have different pronunciations and different meanings. As a noun, it can mean one thing. As a verb, it can mean something else. As an adjective, it can have a subtle difference of meaning again. So that's why in the English language, you have to be very careful how you use it. Okay, so this dependence on the Lord, this is the best position to be in. But dependence on the state, or dependence, like, for example, in my language it says, a person who waits for an inheritance will go barefoot the rest of their life. In other words, you keep waiting for someone to die so that you can have some money. You could go barefoot the rest of your life waiting for that, And then in the end, if they decide not to give you anything, then the whole thing was a daydream. And then also in the Bhagavad Gita, there's some more information here, where it says, dependence. Okay, we'll come back to that. All right. So, back to where we are. The less intelligent are more interested in stories than in philosophy, and therefore the philosophy of the Vedas in the form of the Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Lord Shri Krishna. Vyasadeva and Lord Krishna are both on the transcendental plane, and therefore they collaborated in doing good to the fallen souls of this age. The Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic knowledge. It is the first book of spiritual values, as the Upanishads are. The Vedanta philosophy is the subject matter for study by the spiritual graduates. Only the postgraduate spiritual student can enter into the spiritual or devotional service of the Lord. It is a great science, and the great professor is the Lord himself in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and persons who are empowered by him can initiate others in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Okay. So now, text 26. O twice-born Brahmanas, still his mind was not satisfied, although he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all. So, Srila Vyasadeva is the disciple of Lord Chaitanya, of Narada Muni. Narada Muni is the disciple of Brahma. So Sri Vyasadeva was not satisfied with himself. Although he had prepared literatures of Vedic value for the all-around welfare of the general mass of people, it was expected that he would be satisfied by all such activities, but ultimately he was not satisfied. And this is very significant, as we're going to learn now. Thus the sage, text 27, thus the sage, being dissatisfied at heart, at once began to reflect, because he knew the essence of religion. And he said within himself, purport, the sage began to search out the cause of not being satisfied at heart. Perfection is never attained until one is satisfied at heart. Very important phrase, very important sense. Dissatisfaction of heart has to be reached out, it has to be searched out beyond matter. Matter alone, or material benefits alone, will not actually satisfy the heart. One has to go beyond matter to spiritual things to find real satisfaction. That's why it says, Rajaviti Rajaguyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Dharmam Susakam Kartamabhyayam. This knowledge is the king of knowledge, meaning Bhagavad Gita, the secret of all secrets, the most secret of all secrets. And it gives it is the perfection of religion because it gives direct perception of the soul and its relationship to Krishna, the super soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's happily performed, and it is everlasting. So this happily performed is what gives satisfaction to the heart, because it's full of happiness. There's nothing miserable about Krishna consciousness. The only things that are miserable are birth, death, old age, and disease, of lust, anger, greed, and so forth. Those things are miserable. But chanting Hare Krishna, dancing for the Lord, assisting in arati, hearing bona fide lectures on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and distributing prasadam to the public, distributing books to the public, none of that is miserable. It's all happiness. So the satisfaction of the soul is different than the satisfaction of the body. The body will ultimately deteriorate. How can you be satisfied with seeing your body gradually degrade? So just recently someone called me up and they want me to perform a funeral. Their father was having a good time with his granddaughter. He had a severe heart attack. He never had any major sickness in his whole life. At 72, he has a heart attack. They take him to the hospital, and he had cardiac arrest. His arteries were all clogged up, and they did bypass surgery, but it's not enough. It was too far gone. So they kept him alive, and now they've pulled all the tubes. His wife doesn't want him to suffer anymore in such a state, and now obviously he will exist for a little while and then he'll die. So that's the nature of the body. The body is not going to be eternal, even though the soul is eternal, but the body is not eternal. But if we simply do sense gratificatory activities, thinking that the body can be eternal, there's a great deception. And then we usually end up in a situation like this gentleman, where it's a hopeless situation, and there's only the possibility of death. Okay, so this searching out the cause of not being satisfied at heart. Well, perfection in life is never obtained or attained unless or until one is satisfied in heart. This satisfaction of heart has to be searched out beyond matter. And that's what we do in spiritual life. We search beyond matter. But that's not what they teach you in material education. They say there's only matter, there's no spirit. If there is a spirit, it's a combination of matter also. So how can a person attain satisfaction of the heart by going through an educational system like that? It's not possible. And people who are somewhat spiritually, let's say, oriented, they realize that. Therefore, they try and balance their life off with serious spiritual activity to find out that satisfaction of heart. So then, verse 28 and 29, I have under strict disciplinary vows unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas, the spiritual master, and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the import of disciplic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, by which even women, Sudras, and others, friends of the twice-born, can see the path of religion. So here Vedavyasa is explaining what he's done, and it all sounds very good. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. No one can understand the import or the meaning of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow and disciplic succession. So the word disciple comes from the word, discipline comes from the word disciple. A disciple is meant to be strictly disciplined and to live by strict disciplinary vows. So at the moment of initiation, we take vows. A vow is something that we cannot break. We have to follow it, such as chanting 16 good rounds a day, eating only prasadam, regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam every day, spoken by bona fide devotees, and engaging in time-sensitive, specific devotional service, along with associating with devotees. So Lord Chaitanya recommended 5 things that every devotee must do every day. Number 1 is associate with devotees. Number 2 is chant Hare Krishna. Number 3 is regularly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Number 4 is live in a holy place, like Vrindavan or Mayapur, or a temple. Or, if you don't live near any of those places, make your home a temple. Right? And then number 5 is to live in a holy place and then engage in devotional service. Okay? So those are the 5 things that every devotee should do every day. That was recommended by Lord Chaitanya. And so here it says, no one can understand the meaning of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow and disciplic succession. The Vedas, spiritual masters, and sacrificial fire must be worshipped by the desiring candidate. All these intricacies of Vedic knowledge are systematically presented in the Mahabharata for the understanding of the women class, the labor class, and the unqualified members of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, or Vaishya families. In this age, the Mahabharata is more essential than the original Vedas. Yeah. And the best part of the Mahabharata is that short chapter called Bhagavad Gita, where all these things are explained in very precise, summary way. So you don't have to read all the Vedas. Simply read Bhagavad Gita. And if you want to have an expansion of Bhagavad Gita, you read Srimad Bhagavatam. So now Vyasadeva says, verse 30, I am feeling incomplete, though I myself am fully equipped with everything required by the Vedas. This is the hint. There's something beyond the Vedas. That's why he's feeling something beyond everything he did already. That's why he's does not have satisfaction of the heart. Purport. Undoubtedly, Srila Vyasadeva was complete in all the details of Vedic achievements. Purification of living beings submerged in matter is made possible by the prescribed activities in the Vedas. But the ultimate achievement is different. It's not simply purification. There's something more than that. Unless it is attained, the living being, even though fully equipped, cannot be situated in a transcendentally normal stage. So you notice he's not mentioning what it is yet. That's missing. Srila Vyasadeva appeared to have lost the clue and therefore felt dissatisfaction. So there's something more than simply purification. Text 31. This may be because now he's guessing, right? But it's an intelligent guess. This may be because I did not specifically point out the devotional service of the Lord, which is dear both to perfect beings and to the infallible Lord. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, that's verse 31. The dissatisfaction which is being felt by Srila Vyasadeva is expressed herein in his own words. This was felt for the normal condition of the living being in a devotional service to the Lord. Unless one is fixed in a normal condition of service, neither the Lord nor the living being can become fully satisfied. This defect was felt by him when Narada Muni, his spiritual master, reached him. It is described as follows. So, Bhaktyamam abhijananti yavanyaschasmi chatvata. So, that verse in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktyamam abhijananti yavanyaschasmi tatvata tatomam tatvato yatva vishutetad anantaram. One can understand me, Krishna says, as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So this is the point. Okay, to be able to engage in devotional service, you have to go through a process of purification, and that is following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness in the association of devotees. Those 5 things: associate with devotees, chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra regularly, and regularly hear Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, live in a holy place, and engage in devotional service. So if you do those 5 things, you get purified, and you begin to get the taste of love of God through the ecstatic chanting and the ecstatic service, ecstatic hearing, ecstatic eating. All these things become ecstasy when you see the connection to Krishna. So, as mentioned now, text 32, as mentioned before, Narada reached the cottage of Krishna, Dvaipayana Vyasa on the banks of the Saraswati, just as Vyasa Deva was regretting his defects. Purport. The vacuum felt by Vyasa Deva was not due to his lack of knowledge. Bhagavata Dharma is purely devotional service to the Lord, to which the monist has no access. The monist, or the Mayavadi, is not counted amongst the Paramahansas, the most perfect of the renounced order of life. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of narrations of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. Although Vyasadeva was an empowered divinity, he still felt dissatisfaction because in none of his works were the transcendental activities of the Lord properly explained. The inspiration was infused by Sri Krishna directly in the heart of Vyasadeva, and thus he felt the vacuum as explained above. It is definitely expressed herewith that without the transcendental loving service of the Lord, everything is void. But in the transcendental service of the Lord, everything is tangible without any separate attempt at fruitive work or empiric philosophical speculation. So basically what Vyasadeva did not do, let's say first what he did. He explained so many things, but the few times he began to talk about pure devotional service, it was buried in an avalanche of Varnashram Dharma, of self-improvement through following the Varnas and Ashramas. That does not necessarily lead to pure devotional service. It leads to purification, which is a platform from which one can understand and engage in pure devotional service. But it is not the end in itself. So the impersonalists, they have misrepresented the entire Vedic knowledge by saying you have to engage in all these strict disciplinary activities for purification, and when you become purified, you reject your individuality and merge into the eternal light. There's nothing beyond that. In other words, there's no Vaikuntha, there's no Goloka, there's no Krishna and the gopis, there's no Yasoda Mai and Nanda Maharaj, there's no cows, there's no spiritual world in which this world is a reflection of, a perverted reflection. In this world you see people, they're all individuals, and cows, and this and that. There's nothing like that in the spiritual world. It's just either a vacuum, as the Buddhists say, or it is an emanation of energy, and you enter into that energy not as a person, but as a spark of energy. So, that is illusion, that is misrepresentation, and because of that, one does not have real satisfaction of the heart. How can you be satisfied? As soon as you have a material desire, as soon as you have any desire, you fall down from that position. But desire is the normal condition of the soul. Pure spiritual desires to please the Lord. So, here we see that Vyasadeva did not properly represent devotional service in all that he wrote in the Vedas. That's why you have to go beyond the Vedas in order to understand Krishna. And that is explained also in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nistrigunya Bhavarjana Nirdvandva Nityasattvasto Niryoga Sema Atmavan. Second chapter, verse number 42. Where it said 45. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes, be free of all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So, here it says that the limit of the Vedas is the three modes of material nature. And therefore Krishna says, Nistrigunya Bhavarjana, you must rise above this. You must rise above the Vedas. He's not rejecting the Vedas, but it's explaining the limit of the Vedas. You will not learn to be a pure devotee of the Lord simply by following all the rituals that are recommended, or simply by receiving the benefits of those rituals in terms of material benefits and knowledge and renunciation. The Mayavadis are very renounced, but that doesn't mean they've attained the perfection of loving devotion. So Prabhupada explains, all material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results, which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy, where, in the beginning, there is Brahma Jigyasa, or questions on the supreme transcendence. All the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and get rid of the material entanglement. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma Conduct chapter, are finished, then the chance for spiritual realization is offered in the form of the Upanishads, which are part of different Vedas, as the Bhagavad Gita is a part of the fifth Veda, namely the Mahabharata. The Upanishads mark the beginning of transcendental life. So, in other words, you would have to go through all these Vedic ritualistic activities to get enough purification to read the Upanishads, which are the philosophical parts of the four Vedas, to begin to get an understanding of who God is. So that's a lot of work just to get an understanding, a preliminary understanding of who God is. Right? The Upanishads mark the beginning of transcendental life. As long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress or cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities become free from the anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent, notice the word dependent, right, on the goodwill of Krishna. So, this becoming free from anxieties regarding gain and loss, this is almost impossible for everyone. Almost impossible. How would you survive if you lost everything? Everything that you worked so hard for? Most people can't do it. They go crazy. In fact, I was speaking to a friend of mine, it's a lady who's a psychiatrist for King County, and we were talking about what causes craziness. And she told me, I see it every day. I said, what do you see? She said, people are slowly losing everything they have, and it's driving them crazy. She said, most of the time that's what makes people crazy. Little by little they lose things that they have strong attachment to. They might have worked their whole life to get those things, and little by little they're losing it and they're seeing it go one after the other, and it's driving them crazy. So here it says one has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress or cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities, become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of the Lord, of Krishna. So most people, they would say, that's crazy. I don't want to go through a process of losing everything. In fact, that's why people don't want their kids to be Krishna conscious. They say, well, he's going to lose everything. He'll give everything to the temple. He'll be completely dependent on Krishna. But wait a minute, that's the goal, to be completely dependent on Krishna. So either you use it properly or you lose it. Let's put it like that. If you use everything you have properly in the service of Krishna, then you don't necessarily have to lose it. But if you misuse it, then you will lose it as time goes on. And so what does that mean? That means that using things properly in the service of Krishna, the first point is nothing belongs to me. Everything belongs to Krishna. Therefore, I should learn to live on a minimum. And everything above that minimum I should use in the service of Krishna. That way, you're not affected by the laws of material nature. As soon as we accept more than we actually need, we get entangled. And this is a very hard lesson to learn. Most people don't learn it. But this is what they're teaching kids. They're teaching kids, you should accumulate as much as you can. That's a sign of success. And we see that, the Bezos and other, this Bloomberg, they've amassed tremendous wealth. And what are they going to do with it? By the way, there are many people in the United States that are extremely wealthy. Many, many people. More so than most other countries of the world. But what are they going to do with it? Yeah, they buy mansions. Just like every time they buy these big mansions that cost over $100 million, it's in the newspapers. Right? Just like the son of what's his name? Lachlan. And I forget the last name. It was in the newspaper today. He just bought a house in Florida. It's $120 million. Now, what are you going to do with a house that's $120 million? It's bigger than this temple. It's like 3 times bigger than this temple. You get lost in a house like that, right? Just imagine how much it costs to heat the house, right? It's just, just for one man and his wife and a few kids, right? To live in so much space, you need a basketball court, you need a swimming pool, you need a gym, you need a big high-tech room full of all kinds of gadgets, you need this thing, you need that thing, and it ends up, like a lonely space. And what happens when the kids go to school? They get married and go away. So now just the husband and wife are living in, 30,000 feet of house, square feet. They can play hide and seek. It's 3 times bigger than this temple, right? So you see, the whole thing is crazy. But those are signs of so-called material success. And this is what's causing a lot of distress in the country, because a lot of people don't have that type of wealth. And instead of admiring, previously the people used to admire rich people. They'd say, they're very, they deserve it. They worked hard to get it. Nowadays they say, they're thieves. They're a bunch of crooks, not paying their employees enough money and being greedy. And, they shouldn't have so much wealth. So now you have candidates for the presidency preaching that gospel, that there should not be any billionaires. We should take the money away from them and give it to the people. So you see how vicious it is. So in the Vedic system, that was not there. The richest people were usually the Kshatriyas, right? Because they could get taxes and things like that. But they would first of all, if you look at Ramachandra, he lived like a sadhu. He did not live in abject opulence, or let's say in the corrupt opulence. He lived like a sadhu, sleeping on the floor with minimal with minimal clothes. He didn't have jewelry, gold all over him and things like that. And he administered the state, but he was concerned for the welfare of all the people. And great kings like that would organize these big sacrifices or yagyas, and they would distribute huge amount of charity to all people, right? Not only in terms of food, but all the paraphernalia, which were all gold and silver utensils and cows that were decorated in gold and jewels and things like that. They gifted all these things to the Brahmanas, who gifted all these things. Brahmanas were not businessmen. They also had vows of poverty. So they would then gift, because they lived close to the people, they knew who needed things, then they would give that wealth to the people. And everyone was satisfied. Not that they had exorbitant wealth, but they had everything they needed to live peacefully and happily. Right? So therefore in the Vedic times, there were very few big cities. Most people lived in villages, and the biggest building in the village was the temple. And they all lived around the temple. And the temple was the main place. They spent as much time or more time in the temple than in their homes. And the homes were very simple homes. You didn't have 30,000 square foot mansions. They were all relatively small but comfortable homes, and they had everything they needed. They grew their own food. They had milk, and they had the weather was good. They didn't have severe weather. Why? Because the king was pious and the people were pious. So we see that this culture of the Great Gatsby, as they say. This is a book that was written by a writer named Fitzgerald in the 1920s, when there was roaring 20s. After World War I, there was a lot of material development in the United States and a lot of sense gratification. There's a period of sobriety, so there was a lot of bootleg liquor and secret nightclubs, and then a lot of the hillbilly boys that went to Europe, their eyes opened up because they saw this European culture was very opulent and decadent. So they brought that back with them. Before they were a little bit more religiously inclined, but now this whole culture of sense gratification became the norm in the United States, at least in the big cities. And then there was the big crash in 1928 and 29. And then everyone became poor for until World War II, until after World War II. And they struggled really hard in the United States. People had to sell apples for 5 cents a piece on the street just to make enough money to eat. Yeah, America almost became a communist country at that time. Since there were so many people out of work, there was an economic collapse and so forth. So we see that without coming to the point of devotional service, one is not really spiritually safe. But Krishna consciousness brings you to a point of devotional service almost immediately. Right? That doesn't mean you're a pure devotee, but it means that you've attained the goal, but now, one time Prabhupada said, my devotees are all perfect, but what remains is to perfect the perfectness. Because the position is perfect, but one's stability in that position is not perfect yet. It requires constant practice. And this brings up the subject, the traditional major polemic in spiritual circles. What's more important, works or faith? So the Christians, they said it's faith. So you just accept Jesus, it doesn't matter what you do after that. And other people say, no, you have to do works. You have to engage in charity, you have to engage in austerities, you have to do this, you have to do that. So most of the evangelical Christians have rejected that. They say you just accept Jesus. It doesn't matter what you do after that. But actually Krishna consciousness says both. You have to work constructively follow the rules and regulations very strictly, including dietary rules and all these different rules that we have in sadhana bhakti, and you have to have faith by associating with people of faith. So the whole polemic is resolved in Krishna consciousness. But yet the Christians and other people are still arguing either work or faith. So there was once two people that got into an argument on this subject, and well, not this subject, but a subject, whether you can cut a cloth with a scissor or a knife. So it got so heated that they got into a fist fight, and one person who said knife, he overwhelmed the other person, beat him up, and then threw him in a river, and the other person didn't know how to swim. And as he was being carried away by the current, and he was going to drown, he was drowning, the last thing he said was this. And then he went underneath, he died. You say, this is what happens when there's no acharya, there's no genuine guru. People get into these arguments. Just like ISKCON got into this argument for years, do you fall down from the spiritual world, or you don't fall down from the spiritual world? So some people say, you never fall down. Other people say, it's possible to fall down. And then they both found quotes where Prabhupada says, it's possible to fall down, and then in another place he said, you never fall down.
So this argument is still going on, right? And there are other things that, so there's the Kaka Nyaya, Kaka Nyaya. The kaka, or the crow, lands on a fruit, and the fruit falls down. Now the question is, was it the fact that the crow landed on the fruit that the fruit fell down, or was the fruit destined to fall down at that point, at that moment? So can you determine what's the truth? No. So Prabhupada said there are certain things like that that are not worthy of arguing about, right? But people love to argue and get into these long polemics. A polemic is an intellectual argument. And that ends up in a fight. And some people become adamant, just like that one guy. So he drowns going like this, you say. So there's certain things we shouldn't argue about. We should be patient and continue reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and you'll get the answer. Because Krishna is in the heart, right? So if you're a sincere devotee, the Lord will reveal the answer to you. Right? You don't have to unnecessarily fight. Just like everything is in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So in the Bhagavad Gita, I oftentimes find things and say, this is the solution. Let's see. So let's look at chapter 27th verse. 4th chapter 27th verse, which says, One second, I'll just double check. So this verse says that according to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of the system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So the Lord is the creator of everything. Everything is born of Him. Everything is sustained by Him. And everything after annihilation rests in Him. He is therefore the creator of the four divisions of the social order, beginning with the intelligent class of men, technically called Brahmanas, due to their being situated in the mode of goodness. Next is the administrative class, technically called the Kshatriyas, due to their being situated in the mode of passion. The mercantile men, called the Vaishyas, are situated in the mixed modes of passion and ignorance, and the Sudras, or laborer class, are situated in the ignorant mode of material nature. In spite of his creating the four divisions of human society, Lord Krishna does not belong to any of these divisions, because he is not one of the conditioned souls, a section of whom form human society. Human society is similar to any other animal society, but to elevate men from the animal status, the above-mentioned divisions are created by the Lord for the systematic development of Krishna consciousness. The tendency of a particular man toward work is determined by the modes of material nature which he has acquired. Such symptoms of life, according to the different modes of material nature, are described in the 18th chapter of this book. A person in Krishna consciousness, however, is above even the Brahmanas. Although the Brahmanas by quality are supposed to know about Brahman, the supreme absolute truth, most of them approach only the impersonal Brahman manifestation of Lord Krishna. But a man who transcends the limited knowledge of a Brahmana and reaches the knowledge of the Supreme Personality Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, becomes a person in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, a Vaishnava. Krishna consciousness includes knowledge of all different plenary expansions of Krishna, namely Rama, Nishinga, Varaha, etc. And as Krishna is transcendental to the system of the four divisions of human society, a person in Krishna consciousness is also transcendental to all divisions of human society, whether we consider the divisions of community, nation, or species. So this explains Vyasadeva's perplexity, his dissatisfaction after compiling the four original Vedas with the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, the Vedanta Sutra. After all that, he feels dissatisfied. Why? Because Vedanta Sutra is the culmination of all the other knowledge. It's a scientific expose of all the knowledge in the four Vedas. But by understanding the Vedanta Sutra, you can only attain Brahman realization. You don't go beyond it. It's only when you... And therefore he felt dissatisfied because he didn't actually help the people as much as he thought he was. Because he obscured the knowledge of pure devotional service in an avalanche of all this information about the Varnashram system and following the Varnas and following the ashramas and becoming purified of lust, anger, greed, and transcending the modes of material nature. But that doesn't mean you've attained the perfection of Krishna consciousness. It simply means that you can attain the Brahman realization. But without taking shelter completely in Krishna, becoming fully dependent on Krishna, and engaged in devotional service without fear of, without anxiety for gain, and without fear of loss, one does not actually become a pure devotee of the Lord. You see? So, therefore, he's saying this here, that although Brahmanas by quality are supposed to know Brahman, the supreme absolute truth, most of them approach only the impersonal Brahman, manifestation of Lord Krishna. But a man who transcends the limited knowledge of a Brahmana and reaches the knowledge of the Supreme Personality Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, becomes a person in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, a Vaishnava. So we can see there are many Mayavadis who are very erudite in Vedic knowledge, but they're not actually devotees. They're pure in many ways. They may even be transcendental to the influence of the modes of material nature, but they're not actually engaged in pure devotional service. They don't actually have pure love for Krishna. Therefore, they don't go beyond a certain level, which is the first level of spiritual realization, the Brahman effulgence. Okay, so now we've discussed this, and we come to the end of the chapter. At the auspicious arrival of Sri Narada, Sri Vyasadeva got up respectfully and worshipped him, giving him veneration equal to that given to Brahmaji, the creator. Brahmaji is not the creator, the primary creator, he's the secondary creator of only the material nature. Krishna is the Supreme Personality Godhead. Brahma is also the disciple of Krishna. Vidhi means Brahma, the first created living being. He is the original student as well as professor of the Vedas. He learned it from Sri Krishna and taught Narada first. So Narada is the second Acharya in the line of the spiritual disciplic succession. He is the representative of Brahma, and therefore he is respected exactly like Brahma, the father of all vidhis or regulations. Similarly, all other successive disciples in the chain are also equally respected as representatives of the original spiritual master. The original spiritual master is Krishna. Thus end Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, fourth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Appearance of Sri Narada. Are there any questions? Yes.
Earlier you were talking about the dependence on Krishna. Dependence on Krishna comes from the faith in Krishna. But being, because of our education or millions of lifetimes of impressions, we have this doubting tendency. And because we doubt everything, and even if we hear something, theoretically for a few minutes we do understand for some time, but that still the doubt and other things doesn't go away. Because of all the things, obviously the faith doesn't increase. So what should be done?
Well, faith increases as you associate with people of faith. It doesn't increase if, on one hand, you associate, let's say, 2 hours a day with people of faith, and the rest of the day you associate with people who don't have faith. So the preponderance of associating with people who don't have faith offsets the benefit of associating with people who have faith. So everything depends on your association. So, therefore, first is you have to have a little bit of faith and appreciation of the ISKCON international movement as well as devotees in ISKCON. And then, because of that, a little bit of confidence, you associate with devotees. But in the association of devotees, you learn the importance of becoming initiated properly. And now you strive for initiation by a bona fide spiritual master, and bona fide spiritual masters who are Shiksha Gurus and a bona fide spiritual master who's Diksha Guru. So you only have one Diksha Guru, but you can have several or more Shiksha Gurus. And in their association, you eventually make the decision that I'm going to be initiated. I want to be initiated. And you prepare yourself for initiation. At the moment of initiation, if you properly prepare yourself and you've been observed by initiating guru and the Shiksha Gurus, you're chanting 16 good rounds a day for at least 6 months or more, and following the rules and regulations, then most of the contamination of previous sinful activities is eradicated. At the moment of initiation, by the mercy of spiritual master, the whole thing is put on hold. And now you're free, because you cannot engage in pure devotional service unless you're completely free of all previous karma. So the point of initiation, if it was all done properly, not quickly, but properly, over a period of time, under observation, and make sure you're qualified, and you have to make sure that the Shiksha and Diksha Guru especially are qualified, then your whole karma is put on hold, and now you're free to engage in pure devotional service. And now that's like the official beginning. You already began before initiation, but now that's the official beginning. It's only the beginning. You say, and so now you regularly associate. In fact, if you time yourself, you'll see that most of the time you're only associated with pure devotees. That means, like for example, when you're on the internet, you're also associating with pure devotees, because you don't go to all those different places and things like that. You stick to Krishna conscious subjects, even on the internet. Or, in other words, almost 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, you're thinking of serving the Lord. So even though you're working, but you're working in order to donate to the temple, you're working in such a way that you still have time to come and do regular service in the temple and so forth. So your preoccupation is almost 24 hours a day Krishna conscious. That's when the faith gets really strong, because then there's a reciprocation taking place between you and Shiksha and Diksha Gurus, you and other devotees, you and Krishna. Krishna sees how much you're endeavoring, then from within your heart, he helps you to stay on this path and not fall down. And you'll see that, you'll experience it. And then your faith becomes stronger and stronger. And then you'll see yourself doing things that you never thought you could do before. And you see yourself part of an organization that's doing wonderful things on a regular basis. And you see miracles happening. Other people are coming, know nothing about Krishna, and all of a sudden they become Krishna conscious by the association. So you gather all this experience, and now that every one of those experiences makes you more and more faithful. Okay? So, if you want to know why that faith is not evolving, you should measure how much time you're actually thinking about Krishna during the day. And if the faith is not really evolving, then it's because during the day your mind has wandered way off the track. And the little bit that you do associate is offset by all those other hours that you're not keeping the mind focused on Krishna consciousness. But you can get better and better at it by strictly following the rules and regulations, and especially strictly chanting 16 minimum good rounds a day. That'll keep you on a progressive path. That's my answer. You have to quantify things to understand your position. So in Sankirtan, we try and quantify how many books are distributed, right? And how much we go out on Sankirtan. And in your personal life, you have to quantify how much time during the day your mind is focused on Krishna. And if you see that it's only maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, then that explains why faith is not really getting strong. But if it's like, 18 hours a day and 6 hours sleep, then you'll see your faith will get very strong. Very strong. So we have to be careful not to let our mind go off track. It's natural that it's going to try and go off track, but how well you're able to pull it back and remind yourself what your real duty in life is, that'll determine if you have faith. Someone who has faith can never take their mind off of Krishna. Never. And they'll never go anywhere that Krishna is not involved. And they'll never talk about anything that's not related to Krishna. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
We talk about the food stamps and the Obamacare being bad for the society because they make the people lazy. At the same
They make the people dependent. And then eventually they become lazy.
Yeah. At the same time,
If I give you every month $2,000, right? Let's say you're not working for Microsoft, right? And you get $2,000 every month. Would that make you work harder, or would that make you lazy? Huh? Yeah, you have a place to stay, you have food stamps, and you have $2,000 cash every month. So if someone says, "Why don't you get a job?" You say, "Why should I get a job? I'm only going to get $15 an hour. I won't even make $2,000 a month with the taxes and everything. So why should I get a job? I can just live on this. I don't even have to work. And I can work under the table also and make more than $2,000." You see?
the question is, Maharaj, that but there are genuine needs for some of the people who are, for whatever reasons, they need help. And in the Vedic systems also, there was said that nobody should go hungry, and people in Russia, they are not supposed to feed them. So how to balance in the modern society so that the people who really need, they do get it, but at the same time the system should be built so that they don't become dependent on these.
Well, first of all, you should eliminate all pornography. Whenever there's a statistics given every month, what is the most popular subject on the internet? What is it every month? Okay? It's not the news. It's not the stock market. It's not movies. It's pornography. So what does that mean? I mean, there's a huge number of people in this country are spending hours and hours and hours watching pornography. Now, how do you expect them to have... I mean, Ajamil just saw something pornographic once and ruined his whole life. What happens to people at 24 hours a day? They're thinking about that. And then, how about intoxication? You know, you look, you have an opioid epidemic in the United States. I mean, people in South America are multi-billionaires. How? By selling drugs to people in the United States. So if everyone in the United States stopped smoking marijuana, stopped taking heroin and cocaine and all that, all those guys would go bankrupt down there, right? But no, they're not stopping. And you know how many people die of opioid overdoses every year? At least 120,000 every year in this country, at least, by overdoses.
Yeah, in the last couple of years, the average lifetime has gone down mainly because of the opioid.
Yeah. Yeah, so as long as the government permits it to happen. Now, you see there's this big struggle about building the wall on the southern, you know, and who's against it? The Democrats are against it. They won't give any money at all to Trump to build the wall. Right? So he's got to get money from here and there, and then they fight him in court, and they stop it, and like. So why are they so adamant about not building a wall? I mean, if you ever went to the Vatican has the biggest wall you've ever seen in your life, surrounding the whole Vatican. Right? And Vatican is not small. It's a city in itself. Right? It's huge in Rome. Right? And they have the biggest wall that you've ever seen. I mean, you could never climb over that wall.